As security threats become increasingly difficult to detect, cyber criminals are becoming experts in deception, and that presents a huge risk for small business. Grayson Milbourne is the Security Intelligence Director at OpenText Security Solutions. He joins us this morning to talk about what it means to these businesses and how they can protect themselves. Good morning.
Good morning.
So why do these cyber criminals, why do they focus on these smaller businesses?
Yeah, well, as we reported in our OpenText Bright Cloud threat report this year, over 44% of ransomware attacks focused on companies with 100 or fewer employees. And the reality is that smaller businesses just don't have the budgets to have a really world-class defense system. You see a lot of things on the news about these very large-scale attacks with 6 or 7-figure payouts, but the reality is the vast majority of attacks do focus on the SMB space.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. So are there certain times a year that are more dangerous to these companies than other times?
Yeah, there's definitely events throughout the year that cyber criminals latch onto, and most recently we had the tax filing deadline, and we always see a really big spike here. Now that deadline has occurred, attackers will leverage that and send out spam emails saying that, hey, maybe you missed your tax deadline or you owe the IRS additional money. We'll also see, around going back to school, we'll see a spike then. But then the other thing that's always interesting is, any sort of major news event that really grabs people's attention. Like we had the Oscars a couple of weeks ago, it drew a lot of media attention, and attackers will leech onto that and exploit that to get you to click on a link that could ultimately lead to malware. Yep,
don't do it. So what brands do we know that might pose the greatest risk?
Yeah, so we typically see attacks focus on like two major subsets, and one is social media accounts and your Gmail or your email or your social media, as well as financial institutions. But we also see lots of different patterns based again on what's going on in the world around us. And so when the pandemic began, for example, we saw eBay shoot to the top of the list of most impersonated companies for phishing. But then like a few months after the pandemic began, they fell right off again and not even in our top 10. But as a piece of advice, I always recommend keeping your primary email account password unique from every other account, which really helps prevent if you do lose your information to a phishing type of attack. It doesn't allow them to access your email, which then gives them access to all other online accounts that you have.
Yeah, I mean, I've gotten some emails from some of these companies and they look legit. I mean, you got to look really hard to see something wrong with them.
Another good tip is to, instead of clicking on the link in an email you receive, just type in the address yourself, and that way you're sure not to be tricked by a link obfuscation technique, which is pretty common today.
Yep. And real quickly, how can businesses make sure they're okay online? What should they do first?
Yes, well, I mean, I'm a big proponent of cyber resilience. And so, understanding your assets, educating your employees, having protection at the network and at the endpoint, basically operating in a fashion knowing that you could be attacked and you need to be able to rebound from that attack as quickly as possible. So having a cyber resilience plan and framework is a really great approach to being safe.
All great advice. Grayson, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Gary.
Okay, take care.